There's a laboratory in Boston where scientists are building something that hasn't breathed in 4,000 years. Not a machine, not a fossil, an animal. They're using frozen cells pulled from the Siberian permafrost, gene editing technology that didn't exist a decade ago, and the living body of an elephant that has no idea what it's about to become. The mammoth went extinct when the pyramids were already ancient history. Now we're trying to reverse that. But here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. We might actually succeed. So the question isn't whether we can bring back the mammoth anymore. The question is, what happens when we do? 4,000 years ago, on a remote island north of Siberia, the last mammoth colony was dying. Not from predators, not from disease, from something slower, something they couldn't fight. The world had warmed, the ice had retreated, and the vast grasslands that once stretched across the northern hemisphere, the tundra steppe that fed. Millions of mammoths for hundreds of thousands of years had become something else. Wet, mossy, unlivable. These weren't the towering giants you picture. By the end, they were smaller, isolated, inbred. A few hundred animals trapped on Wrangel Island, cut off from the mainland by rising seas. They had survived the worst of the Ice Age. They had outlived saber-toothed cats, giant short-faced bears, and the extinction event that wiped out most of the megafauna. They had even survived us, the human hunters who spread across their territory with spears and fire, but they couldn't survive the silence. No migration routes, no genetic diversity, no room to adapt. One by one, they starved. One by one, they failed to reproduce. And then, sometime around 2000 BC, while humans were learning to write and build cities and sail across oceans, the last woolly mammoth died alone on an island most people still don't know exists. That should have been the end of the story. For 4,000 years, it was. In 2013, a team of Russian scientists traveled to the edge of the Siberian Arctic, to a coastline being slowly eaten by the thawing permafrost. The ground there doesn't just thaw, it collapses. Cliffs crumble into the ocean, releasing things that have been frozen since the Pleistocene. And that's where they found her, a female mammoth, half exposed in the ice. Not a skeleton, not fragments, an actual body. Her fur was still attached, her skin still elastic. And when they carefully extracted tissue from deep inside her remains, they found something that stopped them cold. Liquid blood, not frozen solid, not degraded into black sludge. Actual hemoglobin, preserved in pockets of ice so perfectly that it flowed when they touched it. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Most fossils are stone, mineralized impressions of life, not life itself. Even frozen mammoths, the ones discovered over the last century, were degraded, freezer burned by tens of thousands of years in the permafrost. Useful for study, yes, but not for this. This was different. The cell structures were damaged, obviously. 43,000 years in the ice will do that. But they were there, intact enough to see, intact enough to sequence. And if you could sequence the DNA, if you could map the genetic code, theoretically, you could do something no one had seriously attempted before. You could build it again. Not from scratch, not from fossils or guesswork, but from instructions written into the cells of an animal that had been waiting in the ice, perfectly still. While humanity invented agriculture and mathematics and space travel, the scientists packaged the samples in cryostorage and sent them to labs in South Korea, Japan, and the United States. And the real work began. Let's be clear about what we're actually talking about here. This isn't Jurassic Park. There's no magic amber with million-year-old mosquitoes. DNA doesn't last that long. Even in perfect conditions, it degrades, it fragments. After about 1.5 million years, it's gone. Mammoths went extinct 4,000 years ago. Geologically, that's yesterday, which means their DNA is still recoverable. Damaged, yes. Incomplete, absolutely. But recoverable. Here's how it would work. First, you extract DNA from frozen tissue. Skin, muscle, bone marrow, anything that still has intact cells. You sequence it piece by piece, comparing fragments to fill in the gaps. It's like assembling a puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the picture on the box has faded. But here's the trick. We have a cheat sheet. The Asian elephant. Mammoths and Asian elephants shared a common ancestor about 6 million years ago. That's closer than humans are to chimpanzees. Their DNA is 99.6% identical, which means if you have a damaged mammoth genome, You can cross-reference it with elephant DNA and figure out what's missing. So you rebuild the code. Digitally at first, you create a complete mammoth genome on a computer. Every gene, every chromosome, every instruction needed to build a living animal. Then comes the hard part. You take an elephant egg. You remove its nucleus, the part that contains elephant DNA, and you replace it with your reconstructed mammoth genome. Not the whole thing, not yet. Gene by gene, edit by edit, using CRISPR, the same technology that's being tested in human medicine right now. You're not cloning a mammoth. You're editing an elephant to become one. 61 genes, according to the latest research. That's how many changes you'd need to make. 61 specific edits to give an elephant the traits that made a mammoth a mammoth. Thick fur, cold-resistant blood, a layer of insulating fat, ears that don't lose heat. It sounds simple. It's not. CRISPR is precise, but it's not perfect. Every edit risks unintended mutations. Every change has to be tested, verified, and proven stable across cell lines. And even if you get it right, even if you create a viable embryo with all the genetic markers of a mammoth, you still have one catastrophic problem. You need a womb. An Asian elephant is pregnant for 22 months. 22 months of gestation, longer than any other land animal. A process so complex, so finely tuned by millions of years of evolution, that even with modern veterinary science, captive elephant pregnancies fail more often than they succeed. Now, imagine asking an elephant to carry a mammoth. Not her species, not her genetic lineage. An animal that hasn't existed in 4,000 years, with different growth patterns, different nutritional needs, and a body structure that her immune system might recognize as foreign. This is the ethical razor's edge of de-extinction. Because if you want to bring back the mammoth, you don't just need science. You need surrogates. Living, breathing Asian elephants willing, more accurately, forced, to carry an embryo that isn't theirs. There are fewer than 50,000 Asian elephants left in the wild. They're endangered, critically so. Every single one matters for the survival of their own species. And yet, the plan is to use them as living incubators for an experiment. The scientists will tell you it's not that simple. They'll say the genetic similarity is so close that the pregnancy should, in theory, proceed normally. They'll say the elephants used would likely be captive animals, already part of breeding programs. They'll say this could generate funding and attention that helps elephant conservation in the long run, but none of that changes the fundamental reality. An elephant cannot consent to this. She can't understand what's being asked of her. She can't weigh the risks. And if something goes wrong, if the pregnancy fails or the birth causes complications, or the infant mammoth is born malformed and suffering, she'll be the one who pays the price. This is where the Hollywood version of de-extinction crashes into the real world. Because even if the science work, even if we can edit the genes and implant the embryo and bring a mammoth to term, we'll have done so by turning one of the planet's most intelligent, emotionally complex animals into a test subject. And we'll have to live with that. Some researchers are trying to find a way around it. Artificial wombs, synthetic gestation environments that could, in theory, support a developing embryo without involving a living elephant at all. The technology isn't there yet. Not for something as large and complex as an elephant or mammoth. We've managed to grow mouse embryos in artificial wombs for a few days. We've kept premature human infants alive in advanced incubators. But 22 months of full development, from a single cell to a 600-pound calf, that's science fiction, for now. So, if we're serious about bringing back the mammoth, we're serious about using elephants to do it. And that means confronting a question that doesn't have a comfortable answer. How much are we willing to sacrifice for something that's already gone? Let's say it works. Let's say the embryo is viable, the pregnancy succeeds, and one day, in a research facility somewhere in the world, a baby mammoth is born. It takes its first breath. It stands, it nurses. Now what? Because here's the thing no one wants to talk about. The world the mammoth evolved for doesn't exist anymore. The tundra steppe, the vast grassland ecosystem that stretched from Spain to Canada during the Ice Age, is gone. What replaced it is fragmented, unstable, and nothing like the habitat that supported millions of mammoths for hundreds of thousands of years. The Arctic today is warming faster than any other place on Earth. Permafrost is collapsing. Forests are creeping north. The ground that was frozen for millennia is turning into mud. So, where exactly would you put a mammoth? You can't just release it into the wild. There is no wild. Not for this animal. Every ecosystem on Earth has spent the last 4,000 years without it. Predators have changed. Migration patterns have shifted. The plants mammoths ate, the grasses they maintain by grazing exist in scattered pockets, not endless plains. A mammoth born today would be an ecological orphan. The best case scenario, the one the scientists are actually planning for, involves something called Pleistocene Park. It's a real place, a massive rewilding experiment in northeastern Siberia, where Russian ecologist Sergei Zimov has spent decades trying to rebuild the mammoth steppe by reintroducing large herbivores, bison, horses, musk oxen, reindeer, animals that graze and trample and fertilize the ground, slowly converting moss-covered tundra back into grassland. The theory is simple. If you bring back the animals, you bring back the ecosystem. And if you bring back the ecosystem, maybe, just maybe, you create a place where a mammoth could survive. But it's not that clean. Pleistocene Park is 12 square miles. The original mammoth steppe was millions. You'd need a dozen parks, 100. You'd need international cooperation, decades of funding, and a level of ecological intervention that makes most conservationists deeply uncomfortable. And even then, you wouldn't be restoring the past. You'd be building something new, a hybrid ecosystem, a Pleistocene theme park that exists because humans actively maintain it, which raises the uncomfortable truth. A resurrected mammoth wouldn't be wild, it would be managed, dependent, a living museum exhibit. Is that really de-extinction, or is it just a very expensive zoo? Here's where the story gets strange. Because the real reason scientists want to bring back the mammoth has almost nothing to do with the mammoth itself. It's about the ground beneath it. Right now, across the Arctic, there are roughly 1.4 trillion tons of carbon locked in the permafrost. Ancient plant matter, frozen for tens of thousands of years, waiting. As the planet warms, that permafrost thaws. And when it thaws, microbes wake up and start decomposing all that organic material, releasing carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. It's a feedback loop. Warming thaws the permafrost. Thawing releases greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases accelerate warming, and the cycle continues, faster and faster, until the Arctic becomes one of the largest contributors to climate change on Earth. Unless something stops it. This is where the mammoth comes in. During the Ice Age, the tundra steppe wasn't moss and shrubs. It was grassland. Dense, hardy, carbon-absorbing grassland kept alive by the constant grazing and trampling of megafauna. Mammoths didn't just live on the steppe, they maintained it. They knocked down trees before they could grow. They trampled snow in winter, compacting it and exposing the ground to frigid air, keeping the permafrost frozen deeper and harder. They fertilized the soil with their dung, feeding the grasses that fed them. When the mammoths died out, the ecosystem collapsed. Trees moved in, moss took over, the ground insulated itself with thick vegetation, and the permafrost started its long, slow thaw. Sergei Zimov's hypothesis, the one driving Pleistocene Park and much of the scientific interest in mammoth de-extinction, is that if you bring back large herbivores, you can reverse this process, restore the grassland, cool the permafrost, lock the carbon back in the ground. And if it works, if this rewilding experiment actually slows Arctic warming, then resurrecting the mammoth isn't just a curiosity, it's climate intervention. That's the pitch. That's what gets funding. That's why George Church, the Harvard geneticist leading the de-extinction effort, can stand in front of investors and say, this isn't about nostalgia, it's about survival. But here's the problem, it's not proven. Pleistocene Park has shown some promising results. The grasslands they've restored do reflect more sunlight. The trampled snow does expose the ground to colder air. But it's 12 square miles in a region spanning millions. The data is preliminary, the scale is untested. And even if it works, even if mammoths could help cool the Arctic, you'd need thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands, spread across Siberia, Alaska, Canada. You'd need a breeding population large enough to function ecologically, which means decades of sustained effort, billions of dollars, and a level of genetic management that's never been attempted. All of this to fix a problem we created. Because, let's be honest, the permafrost is thawing because we burned fossil fuels, cleared forests, and pumped carbon into the atmosphere for 200 years. The mammoth didn't cause this. We did. And now the solution, apparently, is to resurrect an extinct animal and ask it to clean up our mess. That's not restoration. That's desperation dressed up as innovation. but desperation in this case might be justified. If the Arctic permafrost fully thaws, it could release enough carbon to make our current climate goals impossible. Every fraction of a degree matters. Every intervention, no matter how unconventional, gets considered. So yes, the scientists really do want to bring back the mammoth. Not because it's majestic, not because it's tragic that we lost it, but because we're running out of options. There are two ways to look at de-extinction, and both of them are right. The first argument goes like this: we are not gods. Evolution is a process that took billions of years to refine. Extinction is final for a reason. Once a species is gone, its role in the ecosystem is filled by something else. The world moves on. Bringing back the mammoth is an act of hubris. It's playing with forces we don't fully understand, using technology we've barely tested, to satisfy a curiosity that's more about us than the animal. And for what? So we can say we did it? So we can put a mammoth in a zoo and sell tickets? The elephant used as a surrogate didn't choose this. The mammoth, calf, born into a world it's not adapted for, didn't choose this. We're making decisions for them based on our guilt, our ambition, our need to fix things we've broken. That's not science. And even if it works, even if we successfully resurrect the mammoth, we'll have spent billions of dollars on a single species while thousands of others go extinct every year. Because we won't fund basic habitat protection. Pandas, rhinos, vaquitas, elephants themselves, all of them disappearing right now, while we fantasize about undoing the past. That's the first argument. Here's the second. Humans caused this. Not just the mammoth's extinction, though we likely contributed, but the cascading collapse of ecosystems worldwide, the sixth mass extinction, the climate crisis, the habitat destruction. We are the reason the world is losing its biodiversity at a rate not seen since the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. So if we have the knowledge, the technology, and the resources to bring something back, don't we have a responsibility to try? De-extinction isn't about playing God. It's about repairing damage. It's about taking responsibility for what we've destroyed and using every tool available to prevent further loss. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, it's uncertain. But so was every major scientific breakthrough in history. We didn't stop researching antibiotics because the first trials failed. We didn't abandon spaceflight because it seemed impossible. Progress requires risk. And if resurrecting the mammoth teaches us how to preserve endangered species, how to rewild ecosystems, how to use genetic technology for conservation instead of just profit, then it's worth it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We're going to need this technology. Climate change is accelerating. Habitats are vanishing. Species are dying faster than we can count them. Traditional conservation, the kind that relies on protecting land and limiting human impact, isn't enough anymore. We've already changed too much. So maybe de-extinction isn't hubris. Maybe it's adaptation. Maybe it's the next necessary step in a world where humans are the dominant force, whether we like it or not. Both arguments are compelling. Both are true in different ways. And that's what makes this so difficult. There's no obvious villain here, no evil corporation or reckless scientist. Just people trying to solve an impossible problem with imperfect tools, knowing that doing nothing is also a choice. The question isn't whether we should bring back the mammoth. The question is whether we can live with the consequences either way. Imagine the day it happens. Somewhere in a secure research facility, a team of scientists watches as a newborn mammoth takes its first steps. It's smaller than you'd expect, shaggy, uncertain. Its trunk fumbles for balance. Its eyes blink against light it's never seen before. The room is silent except for the sound of breathing, the soft shuffle of hooves on concrete, and the quiet hum of monitoring equipment. This is the moment, the proof, the resurrection. And then what? Best case scenario. The mammoth is healthy. It grows. It thrives in a controlled environment while scientists study its biology, its behavior, its potential. Funding pours in. The technology improves. Within a decade, there are 10 mammoths, then 50, then a viable breeding population. Pleistocene Park expands. Other rewilding zones open in Alaska, Canada, Mongolia. The mammoths are released, carefully monitored, into landscapes being actively restored to support them. And it works. The grasslands spread. The permafrost stabilizes. The ecosystem begins to shift back towards something resembling the Pleistocene, but adapted, functional, balanced. the mammoth becomes a symbol, not of the past, but of what's possible. Proof that extinction doesn't have to be permanent, that we can undo damage, that technology and nature can coexist. Other de-extinction projects follow: the thylacine, the passenger pigeon, the auroch. Not all of them succeed, but enough do that rewilding becomes a legitimate tool in the fight against biodiversity collapse. A century from now, children grow up in a world where mammoths are as real as elephants. Strange maybe, managed definitely, but alive. That's the dream. Now, here's the nightmare. The mammoth is born, but it's not healthy. The genetic edits caused unforeseen problems, immune deficiencies, developmental disorders. It suffers. The scientists try again, and again. Each failure more expensive, more controversial, more ethically devastating than the last. Even if they succeed, even if they create a healthy animal, it doesn't adapt. It's too isolated, too dependent on human care. It lives in captivity, a curiosity, a reminder of hubris rather than hope. Or worse, it escapes. Unlikely, yes, but possible. A rewilded mammoth, stressed or disoriented, breaks through a fence. It wanders into a populated area. It causes damage. Someone gets hurt. And suddenly, the conversation shifts. The mammoth isn't a miracle anymore. It's a liability, a dangerous animal that doesn't belong. Public opinion turns. Funding dries up. The project is shut down. The mammoths that exist are moved to permanent captivity, or, in the darkest version of this future, euthanized. Extinction, again. But this time, it's on us. Not climate, not habitat loss. Just us deciding we made a mistake. Or maybe it's somewhere in between. Maybe the mammoth lives, but only in isolated parks. Maybe it becomes a tool for ecotourism, generating money for conservation, but never truly wild. Maybe it helps with Arctic rewilding in small, localized ways, but not enough to stop the permafrost from thawing. Maybe it's just complicated, a partial success, a moral gray area, a species that exists because we wanted it to, not because the world needed it to. And maybe that's the most realistic outcome of all, because the future, like extinction itself, is never as clean as we want it to be. The mammoth has been gone for 4,000 years. In that time, humanity built civilizations. We invented writing, mathematics, medicine. We learned to fly, to split the atom, to edit the code of life itself. We became the most powerful species this planet has ever known. And we used that power to drive more animals to extinction than any asteroid, any ice age, any natural disaster in Earth's history. The mammoth didn't die because it was weak. It died because the world changed, and it couldn't change fast enough. Now we're trying to bring it back, not out of mercy, but because we need it, because the world is changing again, faster this time, and we're realizing too late that we needed those animals more than we thought. The grasslands needed the mammoths, the permafrost needed the cold, the ecosystem needed the balance, and we destroyed it. So here we are standing at the edge of something unprecedented, the ability to reverse extinction, the power to reshape nature itself. But power and wisdom are not the same thing. If we bring back the mammoth, we're not just resurrecting an animal, we're making a choice about what kind of species we want to be. Do we want to be the ones who fix what we break? Or do we want to keep breaking things and hoping technology can save us? Do we want to share the planet with the species we've pushed to the edge? Or do we want a world where nature only exists because we allow it to? These aren't questions science can answer. They're questions about values, about priorities, about what we think the future should look like. The mammoth might walk again, it might not. But either way, we'll be the ones who decided. And long after the last mammoth is gone, or long after it's returned, that decision will define us. Not the technology, not the discovery, the choice. Because in the end, this was never really about the mammoth. It was always about us, what we've lost, what we're willing to risk, what we think we're owed, and what we owe in return. The mammoth is just the mirror, and the reflection staring back is the most dangerous animal that's ever lived. The only species that's ever had the power to bring back the dead. The only species that's ever had to decide if it should.